I get so frustrated when I hear what a terrible country we are, how racist we are, how this is not the land of opportunity for everybody. Look, we've got a lot to work on, and there's racism that absolutely does exist, and it's wrong. But it's a lot better for my players than it was for their fathers, or for their fathers' fathers, or their fathers' fathers. I thought in so many ways, rather than uniting us as a country, even by race, he divided us. That's what Barack Obama did.
Well, now tuned in to the Dark Times channel.
And so here we go again, back with another one. Welcome back to the Dark Times channel. And I want to go ahead and chime in on some comments that Bruce Pearl said recently.
I get so frustrated when I hear what a terrible country we are, how racist we are, how this is not the land of opportunity for everybody. Look, we've got a lot to work on, and there's racism that absolutely does exist, and it's wrong. But it's a lot better for my players than it was for their fathers, or for their fathers' fathers, or their fathers' fathers. And so I want my guys to recognize there are going to be obstacles, but not roadblocks.
And for those of you who are not familiar with Bruce Pearl, he's the men's head basketball coach for Auburn University. And normally I stay away from political topics, but we have a lot of people that are calling for players and parents to boycott sending their young men to play for Coach Bruce Pearl after the latest unprovoked verbal attacks on America's first half-black president. And it goes without saying, a significant amount of people within the so-called black community really don't care too much for Obama or his policies.
He was probably the most disrespected president in the history of America, but couldn't say because he's black. So hold up. If you're so willing to cut Barack Obama down, if you're so willing to cut Martin Lawrence down, if you're so willing to cut Eddie Murphy down for being the black man in the dress, I feel where you're coming from. I understand the sentiment. But what I'm saying to you is, we're so far behind the finish line that if we don't stand together for the greater cause, we'll never get ahead. Sometimes you gotta cover up and stand up against the ropes and take the rib shot in a 15-round fight so we can win it. Then we can go. You gotta do something better than that. Fuck out of here. Come on, man. Come on, man.
And to take it a step further, a lot of people don't like the fact, especially foundational black Americans, don't like the fact that he didn't do anything for them. There was no policies for foundational black Americans, and he ignored foundational black Americans for immigration and immigrant issues. And so, like I said, it goes without saying, there's no love lost when it comes to that. But that being said, he was still a symbol of progress for many black Americans. Not myself, but for a lot of black Americans, he was a symbol of progress, while at the same time being a symbol of division for white Americans. And Bruce Pearl is one of these people that every time he gets a chance, he preaches that Barack Obama is the number one reason for the division in the country, and the reason why we face some of the issues that we face in the country right now. And to me and to a lot of people, one of the reasons why Bruce Pearl feels that way is because Barack didn't outwardly ignore racism.
That's what Barack Obama did. Other than just love listening to him talk because he's such a great orator, I disagree with so many of his policies. I thought in so many ways, rather than uniting us as a country, even by race, he divided us. Everything was black and white. Everything was the obstacles that were against, my players from being successful. I'm trying to teach my guys, look, I don't want you working at Subway. I want you owning 5 of them.
So let me go ahead and pause it right there. Obama didn't do anything, and he didn't say anything, because when it came to systemic issues, he spoke in vague and general terms, as most politicians do. He wanted to make sure that he didn't upset a lot of people while making sure that he appeased a lot of people at the same time. It's a thin line, and it's a hard thing to do, but one of those things that every diplomatic president should strive to do. And so he didn't do anything out of the norm other than look the way that he looked. And that's a problem for individuals like Bruce Pearl. They want them to chastise Black America and the Black community instead of acknowledging some of the past things that put them in the situation that they're in right now. You can do both. Both things are possible, and Bruce Pearl is one of those people that should know that, because he does it within his own community.
And that's possible. I think in many ways, Barack Obama told a different story. So it's hard to criticize him though, because you get a lot of feedback that's really, really negative. My point on Obama the last time was this. He was calling on Israel for a ceasefire. He was calling on Israel to stop the war. He was calling on Israel, like, to release the hostages. And I'm like, dude, they're not the ones holding the hostages. They didn't start this war. The war and the violence and all the atrocities that go on both sides of the war end the minute that Hamas surrenders.
And so there it is right there. And for obvious reasons, I'm not even going to touch the subject that's untouchable. But it's obvious. People align themselves with their own personal interest, as they should. And Bruce Pearl is a member of a certain community. And so his real issue and his real problem with Obama was what he just laid out. He didn't care about anything else that was mentioned before. That was his real problem with Barack Obama. But it's interesting the way that he goes about verbalizing it. He uses some of the same rhetoric as the alt-right. He sounds just like the alt-right to justify his temperament. Why bring up Barack? Why bring up this 10 years later? Why do they keep bringing up a president that's not the president and hasn't been president for almost a decade? That's the divisive part. You want to talk about division? Bringing up somebody that's no longer in charge and hasn't been in charge for almost 10 years? That's the divisive part. And that's the arrogance of a Bruce Pearl, knowing that he primarily recruits black players to play for him.
This week, obviously, you've been very outspoken about your political beliefs. Has there, in support for Donald Trump, has there been any concern personally or, maybe from people around you about potential impact on the program in any, in any facet, whether it be in recruiting or other areas?
Yeah, I'm glad it's basketball season, right? And
knowing that a lot of those parents, probably their first time, for a lot of them, the first time they ever voted in life was for Barack. And so that's the arrogance of a Bruce Pearl. And I think Bruce Pearl being tucked away in Alabama has a lot to do with it. I think he has a sense of entitlement in which he feels like he can dog whistle. He can go on these networks and kind of throw these dog whistles out there and say what he wants to say without consequence. But that's not the case anymore, because a lot of people online are calling for players and parents to boycott his university and not send their sons there, because Coach Pearl is somebody that seems fixated on talking about race when he should be talking about basketball. And if that's the case, people aren't obligated to want to send their sons to a coach like that with those kind of beliefs and those kind of underlying resentments. I wouldn't want to send my son to go play for him, as I'm sure he wouldn't want to send his son to play for somebody who was fixated on telling his community to get over it and stop making trouble. That would never happen. But those are my thoughts on it anyways. Let's go ahead and try to keep that conversation going on down below as we usually do. And if you hadn't hit that like button yet, make sure you go ahead and do that as well. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you've been enjoying the content so far on this channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do that as well. And as usual, peace and chaos.